Hello, hello, hello. This is Melinda Black, and welcome to the RaiseMerryHell podcast, where we talk about the hell raised on earth. If you hear me stop for a second, it's because my cat just shut off my sound. Hello, Finny. Are you going to say hello? 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 My name is Jennifer. I am a RaiseMerryHell listener. Yes, I am. Anyways, guys, really quick, I wanted to talk about that this podcast is sponsored by me. Bitch, we're a podcast on a budget. And it's sponsored by me. If you go to melindamblack.com, you can find lots of fun links, as well as subscribe to my website to read my books early. That's right, I'm a published author who has 18,000 cats that want to get inside my skin right now. But yeah, and you could also buy my book Obscuria on Amazon. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I wanted to react to some Reddit stories about mimics today. So that is what we were doing. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this spooky little listen. Finniford, I swear to God. Thank you. Had to kick my cat out. Okay, let's go. There's been a tornado warning for the past 3 days. I don't think what's outside is a tornado. I live in the Midwest. I won't say where, that's irrelevant. But I live in an area that's prone to weather warnings, specifically tornadoes. We mostly get them between April and June, but it's not too unusual to get them later in the year. What is unusual, however, is having them last for 3 days. It began 3 days ago. I had just gotten home from another boring day's work. I'd plopped myself down on the couch with a beer, microwave dinner, and my dog, Sam. A small rescue dog. I don't know her exact breed. I planned on getting a little drunk and falling asleep to some shitty late-night TV. My usual weekday routine. When I was rudely interrupted by my TV and my phone blasting a tornado warning. Looking outside, I could see it was a little stormy, but it definitely didn't look like tornado weather. Sighing, I pulled myself off the couch and took my dog and my dinner down to the cellar below the house. I only realized after I closed the door that I forgot my beer. My cellar is just as glamorous as my house. I'm sure you can imagine what that means. Walking down the steps, my hand made its way across the wall before finding the light switch. I knew the power wouldn't last for long, so I began to warm up the generator. After that, I double-checked I had some food and water before sitting down in my old chair. I kept down there and switched on my radio. I figured I'd at least get half an hour's of radio signal before it was distorted and eventually washed away by the storm. While I began to finish off my dinner, the radio cracked to life.
Emergency weather alert broadcast for Sumner County, Texas. Residents are also advised to lock all doors, barricade cellar entrances, and do not answer any call for help or request for entry until an official signal. Stay safe. Good luck.
Wait, what? I said, bolting upright. I almost choked on my food. I quickly leaned forward. I turned up the radio volume, hoping to catch the warning for a second time.
Residents are also advised to lock all doors, barricade cellar entrances, and do not answer any call for help or request for entry until an official signal. Stay safe. Good.
The radio had finally cut out. As the rain began to pelt the roof of the rest of the upstairs, no matter, I had heard it again, for certain. Lock all doors, barricade cellar entrances, and do not answer any call for help or request for entry until an official signal. It played again in my head. Don't get me wrong. This isn't my first rodeo when it comes to big storms or tornadoes. I've spent countless hours holed up here while rain, lightning, tornadoes, and hail wreak havoc above me. But never in my life have I been told to lock my doors or to not answer any call for help or request for entry. That was weird. Initially, I played it off as, I don't know, maybe they're possibly being looters who would enter homes of hiding people and rob them blind. It's happened before, but never during a storm, and never to such an extent where the county would warn about them. Besides, looters don't try to alert homeowners of their presence. Anyway, I tried my best not to think about it, and eventually drifted off to sleep. Much earlier than I would have. Probably just due to boredom. With nothing to do other than listen to the pelting rain above you, it's pretty hard to stay awake. I was woken up around 3 a.m. Sam was barking and growling at the cellar door. That was weird. She never barked in storms, only at people who came to the door or some other dogs. I walked upstairs. I rested my ear against the cellar door. All I could hear was the heavy rain, occasionally some thunder. It was weird. The tornado should have passed by now, but we still didn't get an official signal. It's not like I would have slept through it. I'm a light sleeper. I made sure I had the radio volume really high. Just as I was about to get back to my chair, I heard it. The creak of my front door opening. Shit, I thought to myself. I forgot to lock it. Sam started barking louder, despite my attempts to shush her. The house was quiet for a moment. I used this time to stick a wooden board between the door handles, making the door almost impossible to open from the outside. But then I heard it. Footsteps. They were light, but definitely there. I followed them with my ears as they made their way around my house. It was hard to pinpoint where they were, but I definitely heard them. In my living room, on the carpet, and going up the stairs into my bedroom. My eyes rushed around the room as my panic rose. I felt like there was a pit in my stomach. I was nauseated with fear. I left my rifle upstairs. And down here, the best excuse for a weapon was a couple of inch-long steak knives. I switched off the cellar light, which I had stupidly left on before, and stuck my eye between the two cellar doors. Sam had quieted down, but was still growling. My eye glanced around the limited field of view that it had. I could see my couch, stairs, and closed door to my bathroom, so not much. It was then that I noticed that the footsteps had stopped. Was this what the radio had warned about? I thought all scenarios in my head. Looter, someone seeking shelter, wild animal. It didn't make sense. Then there was the knock. I wasn't sure if I had heard it properly at first, but it quickly progressed from a quiet tapping into a banging crescendo. It sounded like thousands of fists had descended onto my cellar door, thrashing and pounding against it. Whatever was banging, I knew I couldn't let it in. I guess this is what the radio warned about. Instinctively, I jumped back and nearly fell backwards down the stairs, leading into my cellar. Surprisingly, I composed myself, yelled at whatever was out there. "Hey, get out of my house, I'm armed!" I shouted. I don't think I was too convincing, probably thanks to the slight tremble in my voice. The banging on the door stopped. Did I scare it away? It was quiet for a few minutes, but the uneasy silence was shattered when it spoke. "Hey man, you need to let me in. It's really dangerous out here. I don't know how long I could last." Impossible. It was the voice of my brother. I hadn't seen him in years, not since he moved to the West Coast. There was no possible way he was in this state. Hell, he didn't even know where I lived. Every ounce of my being knew that whatever spoke was definitely not my brother, but something else. And yet, I still replied, "Mark?" "Yeah, it's been a while. Let me in. I need to see you. I need to see you." At the end of its sentence, its voice trailed off. It was deeper, almost raspy, not the voice of my brother at all, and I knew I couldn't respond. It spoke again. "Look, Alex, for the love of God, let me in. It's dangerous out here. The storm is strong." I didn't give it the satisfaction of a reply, which only seemed to make it more angry. "Let me in!" It screamed out in frustration. Its scream was sickening, a high-pitched wail that filled the air and made me want to throw up. After that, it started banging on the door again. It was quiet for a couple hours after that. The storm continued, seemingly without a tornado. However, I was startled to hear my radio crack to life.
Emergency weather alert canceled. Residents are advised to leave their cellars to secure properties. That is all.
I let out a sigh of relief. However, my relief was short-lived. The broadcast seemed off. Usually at the end of the storm, there would be a damage report and locations where you could or couldn't go. Or where you could go to receive aid, or maybe even a bed for the night. Plus, I could still hear the rain and thunder above me. There was no way a signal could get through. It must have somehow hijacked my radio signal. Even though I didn't give any response to my message, my radio continued to say I could leave. Every few minutes, the same line would be repeated with perfect sound quality. It was enough to make me want to unplug the thing altogether, if I wasn't afraid of missing the actual end signal. Since all that, it's been rather quiet. 3 days have passed without the storm or my fucking radio subsiding. That thing, whatever it is, still out there, occasionally banging on my door to remind me I'm at my wit's end. If it wasn't for Sam, I think I would have gone insane by now. That's all for the moment. I'll update if I can. Till then, wish me luck. It's the eve of the 4th day now, and the storm isn't showing any signs of stopping. Not from what I could hear anyway. Reading through my last post, a lot of you gave me some really good advice that I ended up putting into action. I managed to get a few little chunks of sleep over the last few days. It's hard. That thing in my house occasionally bangs on the door and calls for me to open it, and my fucking radio is blasting the same message. When I haven't been sleeping, I've been digging out the back of the cellar. You see, when I first bought this house, the previous owner told me that there was a cellar door that opened to the outside, but it was buried under a pile of rubble after the walls on either side of the cellar collapsed. It was strange, but I think it was my only hope. In my last post, a user recommended that I should try and call one of my neighbors. I have a landline stored down here, so I tried to give them a ring. For my first few calls, I got no response. I assumed that they had either evacuated or it was stored inside their house. I was not ready to give up when that thing outside of my fucking door spoke again. "You're not going to get through to them. I could help. Let me in. I will help you. I have food and water, you know." Food and water, thank God, wasn't an issue. I even had a couple sacks of dog food for Sam, so she wouldn't go hungry. Sam actually seemed to enjoy the situation. She wasn't barking at the thing outside the door. Also, someone on my last post made a comment about me using the dog as a distraction while I run for it. Well, the idea is definitely valid. I'm afraid I can't do that to Sam. She's been with me through thick and thin. Even though my cellar is a bit decrepit, I still keep it consistently stocked with supplies for these exact situations. Okay, well, maybe not this exact situations, but just in case I needed to be down here for a few days. Anyway, I tried to call one last time to my neighbor. This time, thank God, they actually picked up. "Hello, Miss Robinson?" Tried not to sound too shaky on the phone. "Yes, do you need help, Alec?" I paused. I couldn't tell them about the thing that was outside my door. They wouldn't believe me and probably would just tell me to fuck off. Or Mrs. Robinson could come over and potentially risk her life by initiating contact with that thing. "Yeah, I'm in a bit of a spot. I'm running out of food and water, and my generator's broken. Would it be alright if I stayed with you guys until the storm's out?" Yes, I think that would be okay. We have plenty of supplies, so come over. Just knock on the door around back, and we'll let you in." "Alright, thanks. I'll see you then." I hung up and prayed to God that I actually had spoken to the real Mrs. Robinson and not whatever the fuck was out there. I had a hunch I was safe going over there, though, because if it had been the thing that picked up the phone, I think it would have been much more keen on me going. Despite its incredible ability to change its voice, subtly it was lacking something. In the time between these posts, I've done some research on what it is. A commenter on my last post said that it could have been a Wendigo. I'll be honest, I don't know what the fuck that is. On the Wikipedia page, it says that it's a man-eating creature that has some human characteristics, but it also resides in the forest regions of the East Coast and Great Lakes. So I don't know if they could get all the way down to Kansas. I honestly don't know what it is. All I know is I don't want it to come near me, don't want any contact with that thing. So before I made my mad dash to my neighbor's yard, I had to work out how to distract the thing. Luckily, I still knew that it was right above me due to the constant banging on the door. Looking into the crack between the two doors, I still couldn't see anything despite the constant banging. I'll be honest, I'm kind of thankful for that. I think I'd have a heart attack if I looked outside and saw an eyeball looking right back at me. I knew where it was though, and that's the main thing. So for the rest of the 4th day, I used a small sand shovel to dig out the back of the cellar, even though though the weather outside was stormy, the digging left me sweaty and thirsty and sweltering in the Kansas heat. The work was hard, especially with my limited equipment. Most of what I dug up was just dirt. However, there were bits of rubble from what I assume were parts of the wall that just caved in, despite the mud from the leaky ceiling and my fucking shovel breaking. I eventually managed to dig out the backside of the cellar by around 6 p.m. Now I just had to figure a way to distract the creature and get me and Sam to my neighbor's cellar without being found by whatever the fuck it is. I spent the next half hour setting up and gathering the materials for my plan. Then I gave Sam some dinner, and I made myself some minute noodles in 59 seconds, and I was in a rush to get out. My plan, as quietly as I could, I placed the board between the cellar doors with a bit of old wood. The wood was kind of weak in its center. I attached a bit of survival rope to it, tying a loop around the weakest point. Then I packed my backpack with a bit of food, water, batteries. On top of all of that, I packed in Sam. Luckily, she was quite small. Then, with the rope in one hand and my knife in the other, I made my way over to the recently evacuated outside door and prepared to make a run for it. "All right, come on in," I screamed at the top of my lungs before swinging the outside cellar doors open without looking back, and I made a run for it. I sprinted across the dry grass of my yard and leaped over the poorly maintained hedge onto my neighbors. Before banging on their cellar door and screaming for them to let me in, Miss Robinson opened the door and ushered me in. Come in, you're already drenched just standing out there." I jumped down into the cellar, and I was shocked to find there was no light. It was almost pitch black inside. "Oh, Alex, you finally arrived," Mr. Robinson said, always glad to have visitors. "Sorry it's a bit dark. Our generator died about an hour ago." "It's fine, really. Better than being without food," I said. I was just glad to be away from that thing. "Yeah, I bet. Anyway, when was the last time you saw your brother Mark?" "What do you mean?" "Oh, he popped in a moment ago. Was looking, wondering where you were." I started to sweat, my adrenaline up and pumping after the brief, calm period. "Is he here?" "Hello, Alec." Okay, that was our first story. It was a two-parter. It was okay. Not my favorite. It was a little confusing to read. I feel like they needed to proofread just a teensy little bit. Respectfully. Let's get into the next story, shall we? This one's called, "We've been guarding an empty room for the past 5 years. Today, we found something inside of it." "Why do we even need the guns?" was my first question I asked as my supervisor went over the protocols. "The room is empty, right?" "It's just in case anyone tries to enter or leave the room," he responded coldly. "Leave? Don't worry about it. Just do as you're told and everything will be fine." I'd been hired alongside Mark to guard the empty room in a small town storage facility. To the best of my knowledge, it had just appeared one day out of nowhere. Since then, only 3 people had gone inside, all of which died within a minute. During their short visit into the room, a camera had been set up, delivering a constant live feed through which we could observe the room, though nothing had ever been seen within. An eerie aura surrounded the place. The walls were made from an unidentified metal, and the door didn't have any obvious way of opening. It either opened when touched or remained closed. Either way, our orders were simple: keep people away from it. 24 hours a day, each day of the year. The room was guarded by one of 3 teams. While the job was extremely boring, it paid enough to keep us from asking too many questions. We were only to contact the team leader, Dr. Henderson, if any activity was recorded within the room, be it actual movement or just sounds heard through the door. Other than that, we were left to our own devices, which meant we could mostly slack around and talk. Every now and then, we'd hear faint sounds coming from behind the door. To me, it sounded like distorted music box playing an old tune. It was one I remembered my mother listening to as I grew up. Beyond that, I could hear someone sob quietly, the familiar yet distant sound of an old woman crying. Mark, on the other hand, swore up and down it was a young boy laughing. Though he couldn't name the boy, he too said it felt eerily familiar. But the cameras showed nothing. We just contacted the team leader, as commanded, who always seemed utterly uninterested during his visits. "Sounds again?" he asked. "Yeah, it's... Mark tried to explain before getting cut off. "It's not important what you hear, as long as the screen remains empty.
Just keep your eyes peeled and let me know if anything changes.
Years went on like that, and we just stood posted in front of that empty room. The metal door that separated us from unknown horrors remained untouched. And as far as we were concerned, nothing would ever change that. We followed orders, we got paid, and that was it. At least until we heard someone knock from the other side of the door.
Hello? Please, let me out. I don't want to be alone anymore.
The voice of an elderly woman said. It sounded like the same woman I've heard sobbing over the years. The tune of that damn music box kept playing in the background. Those two facts really reminded me of my mother, which was an impossible thought, as my mother had died years earlier.
Do you hear that?
I asked Mark, who seemed transfixed by the sound himself.
Yeah.
He responded, barely a whisper.
I'm calling the doc. He better hear this.
I said as I redirected my attention towards the empty screen. I picked up the emergency phone and just pressed 1. It prompted an alarm that immediately alerted the team leader. We had already been through the procedure enough times to make it an unimportant event. Still, something was different. Despite the sounds we'd heard over the years, no one had ever knocked on the door.
Oh God, it can't be.
I heard Mark say in the background. I turned around to find him pale as a sheet. His face was drenched in sweat. His eyes were fixated on the screen. I took a few steps closer, just to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving us both. There was something inside the room. At first, I couldn't tell exactly what it was. It looked sort of like a deformed chair, as if someone who had never seen a piece of furniture before had been instructed to put a chair together. And on top of it lay a music box. Before we could discuss the thing that appeared inside the room, Dr. Henderson entered the storage facility wearing a tired expression on his face.
Report.
Was all he said as he greeted us.
There's something inside the room.
I tried to explain before another bout of knocking shut me up. The sound seemed to wake the doctor up a bit, though he still didn't look too concerned. He at least decided to stick around. It wasn't until he got a glimpse of the live feed before he froze, dead in his tracks.
No, he mumbled.
With that, the image on the screen got replaced by static. Whatever was in the room had interfered with the feed.
Just let me out. It's so cold in here.
The voice said through the door. I could see the doctor getting more nervous by the second. The blood had drained from his face, and pearls of sweat had formed on his forehead. He picked up his own phone, ready to call for reinforcements. But just like the live feed, the phone refused to work.
Hey Doc, what's going on?
I asked. Mark hadn't spoken a word. He just stood there, hypnotized by the static-filled screen in front of him.
You two, stay here. I'm going to get a cleanup crew.
Our doctor stuttered.
Don't open the door. Just stay here. Make sure nothing gets in or out.
He rushed out of the building as he continuously tried to call for help with the broken phone. Once gone, Mark and I gave each other a quick glance before another knock redirected our attention to the door.
Do you see him?
Mark asked after another moment of silence.
Him, what are you talking about?
He nodded.
It was Alexander. It was my son. Your son that went missing 7 years ago?
I asked, confused.
I need to get him out of there,
Mark said in panic. With that, he rushed to the door and tried to figure out how to open it.
Mark, wait!
I shouted. He ignored me, and when he couldn't find any feasible way of opening the door, he prepared to kick it in.
Stop it!
I ordered as I pointed my rifle in his direction.
Please, he's trapped in there,
Mark pleaded.
It doesn't make any sense, Mark. Your son is dead. How could he possibly be inside that room? I can't lose him again. I just can't.
His words were oddly rid of emotion, as if the words weren't his own.
Mark, you're not yourself. Please just calm down and let me deal with this.
Surprisingly enough, he complied with my demand. Still, I needed to get him safely away from the door. While I didn't have anything to tie him down with, there was a closet around the corner. I could just lock him inside.
Just take a few steps back and come with me,
I said carefully. He nodded without arguing, and I started to relax. I lowered my rifle ever so slightly and gestured for him to move away from the door. He turned around, and before I could react, he picked up a chair and threw it at my face. One of the legs hit me in the eye, and I immediately fell to the ground. I lay there in agony, and Mark took his opportunity and jumped on top of me. He swiftly hit me over the head with his own rifle. While I was in a haze, Mark tied me to the same chair he had thrown at me. I don't even know where he got the rope from. I was absolutely stuck.
Mark, don't do this. The doctor will be here any second.
But then the knocking had turned to hammering, and the pleading voice was screaming to be let out. Mark had tears streaming from his eyes. I knew we weren't hearing the same sounds, but I needed to get through to him.
Mark, please.
I begged.
Whatever is in there, it's not your son. Shut up. I need to do this.
He was clearly crying, yet his words carried no emotion. Again, he tried to open the door. That time, he merely had to touch it before it just swung open. On the other side, it only revealed a pitch-black void of darkness. For a moment, Mark just stared at the emptiness. The music box had stopped playing, and the woman begging to be let out had been silenced.
I'm so sorry,
he said before something violently pulled him into the room. As he vanished, the void seemed to pour out to the rest of the storage facility. All light that had previously occupied my surroundings was eaten up by the ever-expanding darkness. Once it had passed me, I felt the temperature drop to 0, muffling each and every sound in the area.
Mark!
I called out, still stuck in my chair. There I sat, in absolute silence, praying that the doctor would return with reinforcement. I could hardly see 2 feet in front of me, but there was something moving around in the room, just vague shapes emerging through the door, pounding wet footsteps as they walked in my direction. I didn't dare make a sound. Mark had vanished, and in his place, the air had filled with a sickly, metallic stench. I tried to quietly wriggle myself out of my seat, but Mark had tied me up too well. All I could do was hold my breath as dozens of silhouettes walked past me, leaving the room. A few moments passed, and then footsteps had settled down. It felt as if the creatures had left the room, but the darkness still lingered. Still, I didn't move an inch before I saw the facility fill with flashlights. The doctor came in running with dozens of guards, all brandishing bizarre heavy weapons. They quickly cleared the room, placing themselves in front of the door that led into the void that had swallowed up Mark.
Oh, God,
a couple of them mumbled. Dr. Henderson was the one to untie me. My wrists were raw from the struggle, but I was left otherwise unharmed.
What the actual fuck happened here?
He demanded to know.
It was Mark. He went into the room.
With that, my boss rushed to peek inside. I followed shortly behind him. The weapons the guards held weren't typical ballistic rifles. Instead, they shot out powerful blue beams that penetrated the void, causing the darkness to retreat to the corners. Finally, we could get a glimpse of what had actually happened inside. There lay hundreds of pieces of broken flesh, strewn not only across the floor, but the walls and the ceiling. They defied gravity and simply covered every available surface with bloody chunks of meat. That, mixed with the other closed fragments, made it easily enough to identify the mangled corpse. It was Mark. Then I noticed something that immediately caused me to puke onto the floor. I saw a chunk of flesh containing an eye, though it was absolutely impossible. The eye darted around the room in panic. It blinked. It responded to light. It was alive. Another chunk contained part of his mouth. It moved around in strange directions, as if it was trying to scream but unable to. Then I saw a piece of his heart, still contracting pointlessly, and muscle fibers hopelessly trying to move limbs that weren't there anymore.
Seal the room now,
the doctor ordered.
But he's alive,
I said, still not believing it.
He made a choice to go inside. Do you want to suffer the same fate?
The guards closed the door without speaking a word and started putting plates of metal over it. A part of me wondered why they hadn't done that from the get-go, but I couldn't bring myself to ask any more questions.
Did anything leave the room?
My boss asked. I just nodded.
Did they touch you? No.
The crew set up a perimeter with guards and cameras facing the door, but I feared the damage had already been done. Whatever existed inside that room had been far beyond the rules of our own reality, and now they were free.
What are we going to do now?
I finally had the guts to ask.
We're going to have to kill everyone in this town.
Okay, I think this is where we're going to end this episode of the RaiseMerryHell podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. I definitely love some stories about mimics. So I think our next episode we will continue with this theme because this is what I'm into right now. I'm currently writing a book that does have a mimic in it. And it touches a lot about urban legends and things like that. So I think maybe we'll continue down like mimics and urban legends for our next episode. So thank you so much for watching. And remember, you could always find me and all my links and all the things on melindamblack.com. Thank you so much. And I will see you in the next one. Stay spooky.